Right, so today we're going to be making a variable regenerative braking lever for an electric motorcycle, as I've been requested by some people to show how to make one of these. So, first of all you'll need a left hand clutch lever for a motorcycle. A hydraulic clutch lever I should probably add, as that's quite important. You're going to need an M10 by 1.25 thread pitch to 1/8 of an inch NPT adapter, which is going to go between the brake and your pressure transducer. Next you're going to need, this is a 500 psi 0.5 volt to 5 volt pressure transducer. Now, I should have gone with 1000 psi one of these, as those levers can output a lot of pressure when they're squeezed very hard. So you should probably go 500 psi is fine for most people, but if you have a very hard brake grip, then you may want something like 1000 psi sensor. Then you may want one of these, which is a 1/8 of an inch NPT elbow, 90-degree elbow fitting, because when all of these pieces are connected like this, it's quite long, so it extends past the lever quite a long way, so you may want to add an elbow fitting in between, so that rather than having your transducer out here, it's down there. Now that's quite a lot cleaner, I myself think, so I'm going to be building mine up with one of these elbow fittings. I'm just going to chuck in a quick disclaimer. These things use DOT brake fluid, in this case DOT 4 brake fluid. This stuff is not very nice, it's quite a nasty chemical. You don't really want to mess with this stuff. Wear gloves when working with it. I'm not, because I couldn't be asked to go and find some. But this is not nice stuff. So that said, let's begin. So first, what you're going to want to do is, another thing you might need is this stuff, which is yellow plumber's tape, which is high density PTFE tape, which is meant for gas, which is overkill, but you don't have to use this. I prefer to, as it will make sure that there are no leaks, and DOT 4 brake fluid will damage any plastics you have, so you will want that to not leak out. So I'm going to be using this stuff. It's not mandatory, but of course it is recommended. Now, it's already got tape on it, as I've taken this apart as I've had it built already, because I haven't had a second one to show how to build this on. I'm just going to remove any Teflon tape that's already on there. I'm going to grab my Stanley knife. Remove any tape that's on there. This stuff can be a right pain to get off sometimes, because once you've had it threaded on, it's really quite difficult to get off sometimes. That's gone quite well though, to be honest. Just going to put those bits off to the side. Remove any that's been on here as well. This stuff's already gone solid from the brake fluid, because it's obviously, even though Teflon is inert, it's having some sort of effect on it, as it's very solid now, rather than being nice and soft, unless that's just from the compression, which it may well be. Sorry about this, this is a bit of a waste of time really. I'll put links in the description about every part you're going to need to make these things. And there we go. Right, that's everything. So now we're going to begin making it. So this M10 by 1.25 thread pitch adapter, if your brake lever has a different attachment, you're going to want to use a different adapter. But all the pressure transducers that I'll leave links to will be 1/8 of an inch NPT. So anything you buy, any adapters, make sure that they are whatever your lever uses to 1/8 of an inch NPT. 1/8 of an inch BSP will not work, as NPT is national pipe thread and BSP is British standard pipe thread. Not backwards compatible, they do not, it just doesn't work. Anyway, so you're going to thread your 1/8 of an inch NPT in there. Not 1/8 of an inch, M10 by 1.25, sorry. Going to go ahead and thread that in there. And I'm just going to remove this out of view for a second and make sure that is nice and tight. There we go. I want to make sure that's nice and tight to avoid any leaks. Then what most would do is probably just thread that straight in there, as it's the easiest thing and it works. But I figured out on my motorcycle this pokes out past the dashboard cluster, so I can't see my gauges. So I'm going to put a right hand elbow on this 90-degree fitting, which is also 1/8 of an inch NPT. Going to put a couple of turns of Teflon tape onto that. Sorry about the terrible filming, I've just thrown a setup together very quickly. I don't have a proper camera, I'm just filming this on my phone. I'm just going to go ahead and tighten that up as well. Just put that into my preferred orientation, which will probably be down there like this, because this obviously faces up like that, so that's then facing straight down. I may actually have over tightened that, I'm not sure, we'll see once it all goes together whether it leaks or not, because it looks a touch crooked to be honest, so I've probably destroyed it, knowing me. Anyway, continuing, and you grab your brusher transducer, also put a couple of turns of Teflon tape onto that thing, just like this. And you're gonna, ooh, blimey. Yeah, there's some fluid left in there, you don't want to get that on your hands if there is any fluid. It shouldn't be, unless you're using a used lever. Then you just thread that on there so that your setup looks somewhat like this. Your lever there and your transducer mounted on the lever at a right angle. Just going to go ahead and tighten that one up. Now most of these fittings don't need to be particularly tight, as there is Teflon tape on there. Just crank them down nice and snug, not too tight, or else you may end up ruining threads. Because these are NPT, which means they're tapered. Unlike BSP threads, NPT threads are tapered, which means if you do them up too tight, you could risk, if you're using aluminium adapters, which I am, you could actually risk cracking the metal. That is it done. That is your brusher transducer brake lever, or your variable regenerative brake lever. And there you go. That is how it looks. Just going to back that up a bit. I'm going to remove the cable so that it's better to put in shot, and that's what it should look like when it's done. So now that you've gone ahead and built that up, the next bit is to add fluid. Now, as I said at the beginning, dot fluid is horrible stuff. It's really not that nice. Also, make sure you get that stuff nowhere near your eyes. It's very irritating, so don't put it in your eyes. Now I've got the fluid that I've actually removed out of this. It's a bit dirty. Use clean fluid. I'm just going to put this back in. Trying to fill your reservoir to the fill line. Then make sure you put the lid on before you pull the brake lever, because on these things they squirt the fluid everywhere when they're not closed. So put your lid on onto your caliper. Not caliper, why do I say caliper? Lever. I'm just going to screw these down a little. Then you want to go ahead and squeeze your cylinder a couple of times, making sure to get fluid into the fittings. So you just want to hold it at angles to make sure you get the fluid into the right place. And there you go. Once it locks up, you'll know that there's fluid in there, and it's locking up as there's in a real brake system there would be some expansion, or rather the pads pushing on the disc, so it feels slightly spongy. This feels very tight as there's no real expansion, but what you can do, if you machine this part yourself out of a solid block of aluminium, you can leave a small pocket for an air bubble, and then it will feel more like a regular brake system. But that you don't get that on these, because you basically just squeeze. It feels like I don't know what it would feel like. It feels like a locked up brake, but it does work very well. Now see, if you hold this straight, there's not much fluid left in there. So once you've got the fluid into your system, and what you can also do to eradicate that feeling of locked up brake is you can put, if you're not too fussed about having this part somewhere else on your bike, you can put a hose between the transducer and the lever. Right, so then I'm just going to top up the fluid. Put on the little rubber cover. Put on the lid. Screw that on nice and tight, as you do not want this fluid coming out and going everywhere. It will ruin all of your plastics. It's horrible stuff. You can actually, I think, put mineral oil in these as well, which is a lot safer. In fact, if you really had to, if you didn't have anything on hand, you could even put baby oil or vegetable oil or some type of non-corrosive, uncompressible fluid, so not water, but hydraulic oil. Any other oil will work in this, I believe. It's just not as good because all the seals on this are designed for dot fluid, and it won't really make much difference, but dot fluid is recommended. I'm not sure how these pressure transducers deal with dot brake fluid, as I don't think many people have done this before, but if you can, put mineral oil in it if you have any, or baby oil, vegetable oil. Any oil is better than dot fluid, as it's very dangerous stuff. So that is about it when it comes to building this thing. Obviously, just you have a switch on here as well, so when the lever is pulled, the switch will activate, which is quite handy, because then you've got your switch that you can connect to your regen switch, and your variable regen output there, which you connect to your regen throttle input. And you just get this cable with it that has 3 wires in it, red, a black and a green or blue. Red's positive, 5 volts, black's ground, and green is your output. These don't output 0 to 5 volts, these output 0.5 to 4.5 volts, so that it can be used with wire off detection. Wire off detection is basically, if your controller receives 0 volts, it will know that there's something wrong, because it should be receiving a minimum of 4.5 and can say the throttle or brake is not working correctly. And if it receives 5 volts, it also knows that something is wrong. But that is it for the video, as this is already 15 minutes long, and these are very simple to make. I probably went into quite a lot of depth, but that should be how to make one of these things. Anyway, that's it for today.